Big Phoenix energy is coming to the Natty. That and Dan Campbell is losing his friggin' mind. Let's get after it, fam. This is Football Friday. What is up, everybody? It is Friday. The Natty is on Monday. The NFL playoffs are right around the corner, and Dan Campbell is losing his mind. And, oh, by the way, we have added the gold primes to the family this week. I will not be wearing them the entire time. I just wanted to show them off because I think they're actually pretty awesome. So let's welcome in Brad, the coach, Powell, and I'm the Iceman, of course. And this is Football Friday, one of the last Football Fridays until we move into a new era of I&C Live. But, Coach, my man, how you doing?
Iceman, doing well. Love the shades. You sent me the picture of those, I think, last weekend or early this past week. And, dude, those things are fire, man. Like, you got fire footwear. Now you might as well move into fire face wear because
Love these.
fantastic. My dad actually asked me afterwards, which I don't remember if he asked while you and I were talking after the show, or maybe he's like, what was up with the sunglasses? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, they're the primes. They're the Coach Primes. Look at that, man. You got the bag, the whole 9 yards. And, no, man, those are sweet. So what? We got New Year's behind us. I tell you what, the older I get, not interested in New Year's Eve, like, at all.
That was actually going to be my question to you. The question that I had to start off this week, and we'll take these off to let everybody see my beautiful moneymaker. But the question I was going to ask you is New Year's Eve the most overrated day on the calendar? Because I think there was a period of time of maybe 5 years in my 20s where I thought this is the thing to be doing. We need to go out on New Year's. And one day I think I had this epiphany that it was dumb and I stopped caring about it. And now I don't even make it to the ball dropping because it's not that big of a deal to me. Wanted to get your thoughts.
Yeah, so, I mean, this year, our daughter stayed up. My wife had to work. She wanted to stay up to midnight. I don't think she'd ever stayed up to midnight ever. So it was very important to her to stay up until midnight, and she did. It was fun to share that experience with her. But beyond that, yeah, I could not. I remember being like at least halfway interested in it, like probably from like middle school to, like you said, maybe early to mid 20s. But it almost feels made up. Like, I get that it's the new year, yes, but there's really no other significance to it other than that. And I don't know, I feel like it was more common in the news this year, what these folks in, Times Square, like, what they go through, what they endure, if you will, to to, like, stand in Times Square for it sounds like if you wanna be there and be in, like, a decent spot, like, you're there for close to 2 days, and there's there's no bathrooms. If you try to go use a bathroom somewhere, like in a business, you're losing your spot. They say these people wear adult diapers. There's something about like no food or drink allowed either. So it's like it just sounds completely miserable. Not even to mention the weather. And I shouldn't say there's nothing I would put myself through that for, because I'm sure there's something, but like certainly not New Year's Eve.
Definitely not to that level. By the way, I've just thought of something whenever I'm going to get up on my soapbox.
There you go.
This is going to happen. So I just want to say this about New Year's Eve. If you have New Year's Eve on your bucket list, all power to you. But it is one of the stupidest bucket list items of all time. For all of the reasons that you have mentioned, I understand that it's turning over a new year. But let me just tell you this. If you want to start anew, you can literally start anew any day in the calendar year. It doesn't have to be January 1st. I understand the significance of, okay, let's put everything in the rearview mirror. But honestly, you can do that just about any time. And I do believe that standing closer to a bunch of people that you don't know, having to not be able to go to the bathroom, not be able to eat, to be cold, possibly rainy, none of that sounds delightful to me. I just don't understand the allure of that experience. But again, I don't want to judge people who do like it. It's just when I look at all of the things that I could put on my bucket list, and we talked about one of those earlier this weekend, and we'll get to that a little bit later, but that's not even close to it. There's so many things that I'd rather do that maybe even include waterboarding before I would ever go to New Year's
So,
Eve
torture.
at you know what I'm talking about?
No, you know what, man? Like, because waterboarding is not gonna last as long. Um
Yeah, I'm gonna die,
As
so that's
well, you
fine.
can't die from it, that's what makes it miserable, is, like,
I know.
it doesn't harm you really in any way except for to just torture you, and, um, what it becomes a mold, is that what you say? Alright, thanks, dad. Yeah, I mean, yeah, when you get older, I mean, now, right? I'm in my late 30s, and it's just there's no appeal to it at all whatsoever. When I was younger in my 20s, early mid-20s, it was basically just an excuse to go out and party. That's really all it amounted to at that point in time. But
Sure.
now, man, like it seems
Yeah,
so stupid. Like I'm not
I
trying to
hate to
like
be
hate on
so
people. It just seems dumb.
I know. I just hate to be so finite about a take because you know how I am. I don't think that you should be that finite about a take, but New Year's Eve just has never appealed to me. I don't understand why people don't realize that when you go out to restaurants, they charge you more and they're giving you less food. It's just like Valentine's Day. I think if you're going to rank like meaningless holidays on the calendar, Valentine's Day, New Year's Eve, they're definitely high up there because to me, they don't show they don't have a lot of significance. They don't hold a lot of significance. Like Valentine's
So
Day,
right.
there are so many couples that say, "Well, if he doesn't do anything for me on Valentine's Day, he doesn't love me." Oh, okay. He could just not love you for 364 other days of the year, and then Valentine's Day, he does the one thing that you're looking for. It takes, I don't know. Like I said, I maybe it's all related to the fact that all of these things can be done earlier in the year. You could pick another day and say, this is the day that I'm going to get clean. This is the day that I'm going to lose weight, whatever it is, whatever incremental thing that you want to do. Because I think also New Year's resolutions are not smart because people way overshoot what they're going to do. It's like, ooh, it's like if I were to say, I'm going to learn how to sculpt this year. I didn't, you know what I mean? Like, I'm probably not going to be able to learn how to do some art form that somebody took decades to learn how to do. But if I don't do it, it's like, well, I'm a failure this year. Well, that's bullshit.
Yeah, I'm with you on Valentine's Day because like, let's say, let's get in the time machine and go back to like my dating days. Like if I could talk to myself then, like and luckily like, my my wife is kind of on the same page with me with these sort of things. But I would have asked, one of the most important questions I would have asked someone is, "How important is Valentine's Day to you?" Like, if you don't get, um, showered with gifts on Valentine's Day, is that a deal breaker? Is that a problem for you? And if the answer was yes, I would just it'd be a deal breaker for me. And it's not because
Well, you fired that away on a
I'm
first
saying
date.
I didn't, but I'm saying if I could go back in time, I 100% would, man, because I feel like that tells you a lot about a person that like they value those type of material things on that day. It's like haven't and me and Ryan disagree about this because he's all in on it. Because I've voiced on pub time before, but I think Valentine's Day is stupid. But it's if you value those material things so much, like you said, if that one day of the year really matters so much, and it's a made up holiday, there's no significance to it beyond that. Like you should be showing your significant other that you love them every day, not just on Valentine's Day because someone said it's the day to celebrate love or whatever. I mean, like I would much rather do something special for your birthday because at least there's some meaning attached to it.
Yes. But also, you can be all in on Valentine's Day and still understand that it's one day, right? It's not even indicative of the entire year, right? You can do that if you want. There's nothing wrong with spoiling your spouse on any given day, as long as you understand that it doesn't have to be all that. But let me ask you this. What is the male equivalent of Valentine's Day? Like, what is the day in the calendar? And let's not say birthday or Father's Day, because not everybody celebrates Father's Day, obviously. But like, is Super Bowl Sunday that? Is it like, "Hey, look, I just wanna watch the game. Your gift to
Mm,
me is to leave me alone." Like, what is the day for us? Do we have one?
I don't know because I think that Super Bowl Sunday, I think, is sort of regarded by. I
Family
think, yeah, I
almost?
think it's regarded by both genders, if you will. I don't think it's male specific. Obviously, more male than female, but I mean,
First day of the NCAA tournament?
maybe that would be up there. Uh, Possibly, the one that popped in my head right away was like St. Patrick's Day or something like that. But everybody, I mean, I don't think that's male specific, but in terms, yeah,
Everybody culturally
sure,
appropriates on St.
absolutely they
Patrick's Day,
do,
right? Yes.
absolutely. Yeah, it might be like first round NCAA tournament or first day. Super Bowl is probably up there.
Every Sunday and
Really,
Saturday
yeah,
during the
maybe.
fall.
like, every Saturday and Sunday from September to January.
Yes. Well, speaking of Valentine's Day, the Rose Bowl was this past weekend. So the college football playoff semifinal happened. I feel like this season has been long, but also it went by super, super quick because it felt like we just did our first show not that long ago. And now we've been through the whole season and we have pared it down to now two teams in college football. And we've been here every step of the way, just about. So the Rose Bowl takes place. Now, one of the things about the Rose Bowl is that it happens in an iconic venue, but it's an iconic venue that's old, and it's an iconic venue that outside of that game and I think what UCLA games and maybe a couple of other things, from what I understand, they have a limit to what they can actually do in that stadium. I assume because it's old or because it's a relic of some type. But the Rose Bowl game itself is the game that they have every year. And at one point in time, it was a staple of college football. Like it was almost the symbol of college football. And I told you over the weekend that if I were to go to a game, I'd like to go to the Rose Bowl game in the Rose Bowl. But one of the things I didn't tell you is that I would not want to go to just some random game, right? I would want to go to that game. And you said that you think that the ship has sailed on the Rose Bowl. Well, interestingly enough, our boy, Tyler Budge, had something to say to Stephen A because Stephen A. Smith said that they should move the Rose Bowl to SoFi Stadium. So you've got two interesting Venn diagrams here because you have the new age look of, hey, this is a business. We need to make sure it's updated. And then you have Budge, who is a purist and a purist in the best ways, right? Like he wants to preserve college football for what it is. But you don't think the Rose Bowl is worth a damn anymore, do you?
Alright, so as you're talking, 'cause I like to try to be, I like to try to reflect on my opinions and thoughts and be as objective as I can and see the big picture,
Sure.
as
Hmm.
often as I can. I'm not perfect, right? Nobody is, but, I agree. Like, the Rose Bowl, the game of the Rose Bowl, there's an aura around it that doesn't exist around the Sugar Bowl, the Peach Bowl, the Orange Bowl, the Cotton Bowl, whatever. Um, that's I agree with that. And so what I told you is that I've heard that it's kind of a dump, it's run down, whatever. But I'm like, you know what? Like I'm a Cubs fan. Now, granted, they've put a lot of money into renovating Wrigley Field, but for the longest time, like it beloved by Cubs fans, but a lot of people are like, "The place is a dump." And it right, I mean, really, it was. I mean, I haven't been there since they've done the renovations, but the last time I was there, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's an old stadium that's did not have the amenities that you see at the new modern stadiums. And so I'm like, but I thought it was a special place. And I'm like, you know what? What's different about what makes the Rose Bowl any different? Like, it should be revered in the same way. And it is, like by yourself and others. And I'm like, maybe I'm too quick to be critical of the Rose Bowl as a stadium. I disagree. I don't think that you move the Rose Bowl to SoFi Stadium. And I also told you that I've seen several things where players have talked about the playing surface at the Rose Bowl being one of the most pristine playing surfaces that they've ever played on, college, pro, or otherwise. And that means something. Because I would be pissed as a fan to watch a game and the game be altered or overshadowed by a poor playing surface. I mean, we've seen I feel like we see it more in the
We've seen it
NFL than you see it in
this past
college.
Super
Yeah.
Bowl,
And I think that's because a lot of these NFL stadiums are used for so many different things, all of those big concerts, and like they get resurfaced literally like week to week sometimes with sod. And and obviously there's been sort of a debate about turf this year and the injuries that are associated with it, but
which we debated earlier
we
this
did.
year with Aaron
But
Rodgers. Yes.
you don't move the Rose Bowl out of there. I think Kirk Herbstreit came out and said they should play like that should just be the default home of the national championship game every year.
That's not a bad idea. I mean, look,
It won't happen because it doesn't hold enough people to make enough money. But
of course not. But like, I understand both mentalities of this. I'm somebody who likes tradition, and it does matter to me. And the stadium is old. Fenway Park is also old. They've done a lot of things to Fenway Park, but part of what makes it special is how old it is, right? Because the longer that time goes on, the more modern our society becomes, the less of those quote unquote cathedrals of sports start to exist. In college basketball, you could make the argument that Cameron Indoor is a relic of the past because it's tiny. The announcers have to be way, way up top. the students are right on top of you. Where if you look at a lot of the other arenas that are being built now on campuses, they look more and more like pro arenas, right? And we're losing a lot of the tradition. And I understand people who say that it's old and that we need to move on, we need to modernize the sport. We're losing more and more of that stuff in college football, and you and I are both on board with it. It is what it is. We're not complaining or wanting anything else. But the Rose Bowl feels like the last thing you take away from college football because it's the one thing that people associate with college football. Nobody says, "Ooh, the Rose Bowl for that one concert that I saw that one time," right? Most people who are tangentially aware of sports know that the Rose Bowl is about college football. And if you're a college football fan, you know that there's so much tradition that has gone into it. It means something to the players to play in the Rose Bowl, whether it's for the national championship or not.
It does. No, you're right. And the more we talk about it, the more I sit here and think about it, I'm kind of disappointed in myself for my immediate take on this because I love historic venues. Uh specifically sports venues, but just historic venues of any kind, even if they're theaters, concert hall, whatever, historic buildings, but historic sports stadiums just hold a special place in my heart. I mean, even you talked about college basketball. So Bradley, they had an on-campus arena for 30 years called the Robertson Memorial Fieldhouse, and it was literally two like surplus hangars from World War II attached together. They put a raised floor in the middle of it that was literally like 3 feet off the ground, and there were seats on both sides, and it was loud, and it was crazy, and I got to go there to watch a couple, like, preseason games and stuff when I was younger, before they ended up tearing it down, but, like, their record in there was, like, insane. Like, Larry Bird never won a game at Robertson Fieldhouse when he was at Indiana State. Back then, like, Louisville was one they were in the Missouri Valley, I think, at that point in time, but they were still one of the better teams in the country, and I think and my dad will chime in, but I wanna say, like, Denny Crum or whatever was the head coach at Louisville, and, like, he, like, someone, like, vowed, like, "I'm never coming back here again to play a game." Like, "I refuse to come play here." Just because, I mean, you literally if you dive for a loose ball out of bounds, like, you could fall off the floor. I mean, just the home court advantage was absolutely insane. I mean, the place held just shy of 8,000 people, and it was sandwiched basically in the middle of the neighborhood on the West Bluff, in Peoria, you know what I mean? And it was, yeah, my dad Bradley only lost like 100 games there and won over 1,000. Like, I mean, it was just absolutely nuts, and like, if I could go back in time, I wish they would've maybe invested in, like, making it a little more modern with amenities as opposed to moving to downtown Peoria into the new, um, civic center and so on. But, yes, I have a special place for historic sports venues, and so, yeah, kind of ashamed of my original take being so critical of the Rose Bowl because you make some very good points, and
It did surprise me, I'll be honest. Like when you fired, because you fired that quickly, very quickly. And I was very surprised because I thought you would have felt the same way that I did about, yes, you can point out the things that are old and crusty about it, but it means something. But I mean, think about this one last example. Yankee Stadium, when they tore down Yankee Stadium and built new Yankee Stadium, nobody feels the same way about new Yankee Stadium as they did about old Yankee Stadium, which housed all of the greats
yes.
in Yankee history, right? Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle. The list goes on and on and on. And new Yankee Stadium just doesn't feel the same when they could have just updated what they already had, the same way that the Cubs did, the same way that the Red Sox did. I mean, even Comiskey Park, it's not Comiskey anymore, but it's in the same area. That's still the old stadium that they used to play at, you know? And like I said, more and more modern things replace these old relics that are a tie to a point in time that we don't identify with anymore. So I was just kind of surprised about it. But the game in and of itself was, I would say, sloppy yet spectacular. And that could be a description for many other things that aren't necessarily appropriate for this show. But in my opinion, that game met all the expectations that I was looking for. And it was even, it was back and forth. And somehow, maybe this is wrong, but somehow Nick Saban did one of his best coaching jobs in a loss.
Yeah, maybe so, but I what killed Alabama was honestly unforced errors, the bad snaps and stuff
Yes.
like that and penalties. That absolutely killed them. And it was, I mean, Michigan didn't play their best game, but that's not even
No,
necessarily an indictment on you're gonna when you have 2 great teams playing each other, like, people always forget that the team on the other side is trying really hard too, and they're probably and in this case, they're really good too, and they're gonna make you look not so good sometimes, and they're gonna force you to make mistakes, and that's why they're in that game in the first place because of how good they are, and, so I liked it because it had, like, everything that makes up a great game. You had you had teams you had mistakes, obviously, nobody played a perfect game. So you had
no.
both teams had to attempt to overcome adversity at different points in time. Now Alabama, like we talked about last week, has faced way more adversity throughout the season than Michigan has. That was the first time Michigan had ever, kinda had their backs against the wall. We speculated about how they would respond, and, I mean, the proof is in the pudding at this point, but, it was I was even though we thought that they may handle it that way, I was still impressed with how poised they seemed in the last minutes of that game to tie it, to send it into overtime, and I did just have that gut feeling that, okay, if Michigan gets this thing in overtime, like, it's over. They just felt like it was like, okay, like, time to get serious almost, like, it just felt like a switch flipped.
It did feel like a switch flipped, and it also felt like even when it seemed like Alabama was poised to put the nail in the coffin, Alabama never played confidently, really, except for a stint in the third quarter where they moved the ball pretty well. They're able to put some points on the board. But for a vast majority of that game, Alabama did not look like the emotionally mature team out there. And it was like I never got the sense that, ooh, if they get a bounce here or there, they're going to take advantage and they're going to win. Whereas we both felt that way about Michigan. As soon as they tied it, it was like, man, that's deflating to Alabama. And now, and they're going to have to go to overtime. And college overtime is way different. It's a different game than it is in the NFL. And I just never felt like Alabama had any type of hold on that game, even when they had the lead and even when they had the opportunity to get a touchdown to really put the game away. And Michigan, to their credit, didn't seem like they were going to respond for a while. It seemed like they were kind of deflated also from the standpoint of kind of a, wow, we've done everything to this team, even with the unforced errors, and we still can't put them away. But they did. Good teams, great teams find a way to win. We've always talked about that. We talked about it with Alabama getting into the playoff, 4th and 31 against Auburn. If you're going to win a national championship, at some point in time, you're going to have to be battle tested, and beating Alabama in the Rose Bowl, the way that they did, overcoming adversity, to me makes Michigan a very dangerous football team now because they got over that hump. They got over the hump of winning a
Yeah, it's
semi, and they did
a
it
mental
against
hurdle. Yeah.
Alabama. Yes, that's a big deal. It's a big deal when you're young, right? I think in the pros, it's a little different because you're professionals. But when you're kids, like this game is everything to them, right? It's everything. And so to get over that hump, every single person in that locker room, every single person in the fan base, there was a sigh of relief. There had to be a sigh of relief. And if you're telling me that there wasn't, I think you're lying to yourself.
No, you're right, and there is something about playing teams programs like in Alabama. So, I think back to, like, when I was in high school, my senior year, um, we weren't very good, but we were talented, and, there was a team in the area that had been the perennial power and, like, had been to the state championship game multiple times, won a state championship or 2, dominated the conference. I mean, they were anytime somebody talked about football in the area, they talked about this program. But this my senior year, the group of kids that were my age from that school, they were not very good. And, that was, like, the worst it ended up being the worst season they had had, I don't know, 15, 20 years or something like I mean, they still made the playoffs, but barely. And we played at their place, and we actually went to overtime, with them and lost in overtime. But it was like I remember feeling like no matter what we did 'cause even though we knew, like, I was on the field against these players, even though I knew, like, these were not like, this wasn't the same type of team, this was not as good of a team as they traditionally has, it had in the past, they had last year's, they're gonna have next year, whatever. It's just like you knew they were gonna find a way to win. It's like you weren't just up against those guys in the field, you were up against the program as a whole, like, the the ghost of whatever players past. I mean, just you just felt like you were up against a million people, right? And I think that's probably similar to what it feels like playing against Alabama with a legendary coach like Nick Saban. Is you have in the back of your head that like this guy's gonna find a way to win this football game. And what I would say is I think Nick Saban said as much in a more humble way, but he said this is one of his most gratifying years as a coach because of how much they improved. And so I think, I mean, that's really him saying like this team wasn't very good and they got to where they did because of him and his coaching staff. You know what I mean? Like I think this is one of his best coaching jobs ever.
Oh,
You
I
know what I
agree.
mean? As a whole for the season. And because that team was flawed, very flawed, and it showed up, on Monday night, and they still were right there. They still were in overtime. You know what I mean? Like against the team that everybody's kind of assumed is the best team in the country at this point.
Yes. And as flawed as they were, they deserved to be there, right? That game was not a blowout. That game was winnable for Alabama. So both of those teams certainly deserve to be in the playoff. They earned their way. And that game was great. I think Michigan, to their part, their defense is so good. It's just suffocatingly good. And don't forget, Jalen Milroe had a rough game against Michigan. A lot of quarterbacks have looked that way against Michigan this season. And Jalen Milroe, against lesser defenses, had put up some really great stats and had been starting to do some things. In this game, it wasn't happening through the air. Although I will tell you, though, that it kind of reminded me of watching a Notre Dame game because it felt very conservative for a while. Alabama felt like they were running against the brick wall and were almost too stubborn to do something different. For a while, it seemed that way. And I don't know if you felt the same way, but the offensive play calling left me a little bit confused. And Jalen Milroe, in a lot of ways, with his legs, really took the team on his back for a majority of the third quarter. And obviously, they were able to finally establish some running lanes. Their offensive line wasn't getting bullied anymore. But I don't know. Offensively, it was a little weird. And then obviously, the last play of the game, lots of questions there. But how did you how did you feel about Alabama's game plan? How did you feel about their offensive strategy? And then we'll get into the last play of the game, which is all that
Well,
everybody's
I
talking about.
think that them knowing their team, they probably went into that game with the approach of, all right, let's try to shorten this game. Let's limit Michigan's possessions with the hope that, we can stay within striking distance, keep this thing close, have a chance to win it in the end, one way or another. And that's where a lot of the running stuff comes from. Run the ball, let's run the ball, control the clock. Now, I think that, Tommy Reese is very smart. He's a very smart offensive mind. I don't think he's a great play caller, though. He's a great designer of plays. I think he's good at creating game plans, but he's one of those guys that, like, I think when you say stubborn, it's because he's like, when I draw this on paper, it works. You know what I mean? Like on paper, this play should work, and it's not working, and he doesn't adjust well um, on the fly as the game goes on. Because dude, I saw that the game plan as a whole was kind of garbage. Okay, but there were a few plays in there where I'm like, that was genius. Just the design of the play, the way and and you could tell by when the play was called that it wasn't like, it was part of the overall game plan. It wasn't him making an adjustment on the fly. It was part of the game plan ahead of time of we're gonna run this sequence of plays, we're gonna do things this way to set up this play at some point in time. Like, there were a few times in the game where I saw that happen. And it's like, man, that was beautiful, but he's just not good when he has to go off script, I guess. Here we go. We got James, and we'll get back on the ball game. Rough, rough week for young James, and but hopefully he can bounce back this week with the national championship game.
Okay, we got him. He came over the wrong side here, so we've got to get him set up and ready to go. So give me a second here. Okay. Hello, James Allen. How are you?
Good.
Okay, so James, you are here to pick college football games. Unfortunately, and we've been over this, is we had to have a rest in peace for the Alabama Crimson Tide as James, for the first time, went 0-2 in his football picks as Alabama
Wah
lost a
wah
very, very
wah.
close game. And the Texas Longhorns made a raging comeback, but just could not put it together against the Washington Huskies. So, James, that leaves you at 11-7 for the season. However,
What?
it does. It leaves you at 11-7. However, I do have good news for you. The game picking does not end. Would you like to pick one other game this week for us?
Yeah.
Would you like to pick a second game?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to start with this one. Are you ready? Okay. Washington,
Washington.
Michigan.
Michigan.
Who is going to win?
Michigan.
Okay, that is a very, very solid pick. Either one of those would be solid, but Dave Rawls would be very, very happy as Michigan is going to win the national championship, according to James. Okay, a very important game in the NFL landscape. Are you ready to pick this game?
Yeah.
Okay, Buffalo,
Buffalo.
Miami.
Miami.
Who's going to win?
Miami.
Ooh, okay, so he has the Dolphins over the Bills. The winner gets the AFC East. Okay, we will see how you fare next Friday. So we have a national championship pick. That's not a bad pick. I mean,
No, you couldn't
really,
have gone wrong. You couldn't have gone wrong with that game, the way he picked it, and the Dolphins have been on a
no,
little bit of a cold
that's
streak
not going to be
of
good.
late,
That's not going to
right?
be
I mean,
good.
but
No,
that's the most NFL thing though, is like it's like we talked last week.
you're right about
Every
that.
good team has had like a stretch where they've really struggled. Now, this isn't the time to be doing that in the
No,
NFL by any
no,
means, but every team has
no.
kind of worked through that stretch of games where they've struggled, and maybe that's what this is for the Dolphins. But um, to circle back to Alabama,
Yes, let's go back to Alabama. Rest in peace to their
yes,
season. But go
but
ahead.
no, like I said, I think Tommy Rees is a great designer uh, of offensive game plans. I think he's really intelligent. I think that he would probably destroy almost anybody on a whiteboard. And but the game's not played on a whiteboard, right? I don't think he's very good when he gets off script and when he has to make adjustments. He just seems to struggle. Now, what I think we also saw though was I think that they attempted from the get go, as by design, to put the game in Milroe's hands. You know what I mean? I think they made an effort to put the game in his hands, and what we saw was a guy that just wasn't ready for that.
Maybe he wasn't ready, or maybe he was ready, but perhaps that team was just better. Michigan was just vastly better. And so that game plan, when you have nothing else, and we've talked about that with the Chiefs, right? Patrick Mahomes can't win all of the games for them. You need somebody else to step up and make some plays. And as dynamic as Milroe could have or could be this season, I think it was too tall of an ask to just say, let's put the ball in our best player's hands solely in this game. Now give Milroe some more time and some more reps. Maybe he will be ready for that moment. But I want to say this about Tommy Rees is when I hear you describe this, Tommy Rees is like the engineer, the guy who designs all of the fancy stuff. But then when the sales rep comes to him and says, "Well, the customer can't use it," he's like, "Well, what are you talking about? I designed it. It works as designed, but it's not user friendly." And so you can be great on a whiteboard all you want, and you could be street smart. I mean, you could be book smart, but you need to be able to do things in the moment. And I think play calling and play designing completely different because there are people who just really know how to call a good game. Andy Reid, maybe Andy Reid doesn't come up with all the plays, doesn't design all the plays, but when it comes to calling a game, the guy knows what he's doing.
No, absolutely he does. Kyle Shanahan's another great one that comes to mind that's out there. Just a great play caller. And you're right. There is a difference between a designer of an offense, an engineer, if you will, and yes, the play caller that puts it into motion. Because I think to be a good play caller, you have to be able to see things and make adjustments quickly, but you also have to have patience and some foresight so that you can set up things. And it's a really interesting combination of things that not a lot of people have, and especially in that under that kind of pressure. And so that's why these great offensive coordinators are so revered because it's hard to find that skill set um, in one person. And I mean, I'm sure there are staffs that utilize multiple people to attain that combination, which is fine. But yeah, it was definitely we're saying all these things about Alabama as if they weren't ready to play in that game or something. If you were to
They
no, I
were.
know, but I'm saying if someone were to pop in and didn't watch that game and just heard our last 5-minute conversation about Alabama, they'd be like, "Man, like, they must have looked pretty bad." We say that, and they lost in overtime, you know what I'm saying? So, it's that's what I'm saying. I mean, they with even with all the errors and the flaws maybe and some of the execution, they were still right there with a chance to win the ball game.
Well, it's a testament to the coaching. It's a testament even to the players on that team. They might have given everything to the maximum of their ability in that game, right? And perhaps that just wasn't enough against Michigan. The thing about Michigan, though, is if you only watch this game, you'd think, well, Michigan isn't very good. But I think this is what happens when you get the four best teams playing against each other. They should be this even. And even to an extent, sometimes they should be sloppy. And yeah, there were some unforced errors. Michigan made their own unforced errors a couple of times. Almost started the game off with an interception. Thankfully, the defender was already out of bounds. Muffed a punt. There were plenty of instances where we would have been saying the same thing about the Michigan Wolverines. But in the end, the better team made the plays. And that's all that it really came down to, is that the better team made the plays at the end of the game when it mattered the most. And that's what really great teams do. But this game to me felt like it was perfectly placed in the Rose Bowl. It felt kind of old school in a lot of ways, right? It kind of harkened back to a different time in college football, but yet still felt perfectly acceptable today, if that makes sense. I don't know. There was something about it just watching. I thought, I'm not sure how this could get any better. And then the Sugar Bowl happened. Now, I will fully admit to you, fell asleep at halftime because that game started at 9 o'clock here on the East Coast. I don't have the appetite to be staying up that late. That game ended at like 1 a.m. because I think you texted me about 1 a.m. And the Washington Huskies heard all the criticism that people had thrown at them, all the shade that Vegas had been throwing at them. And I'll tell you what, man, Big Penix Energy came out and had one hell of a game in one of the biggest spots of the year. But Texas was game. That comeback it was so close.
Yeah, it was really impressive, and I kept I'm thinking to myself because it really felt like I'm like, "Man," about the time I think it turned over to the 4th quarter, and I'm like, "Okay, this game's not gonna be as close as the other one. We're not gonna have an exciting finish." But then a couple things happened, and I'm like, "Man, like, if this, and this happens, like, Texas might put themselves in a position to win this football game." And sure enough, like, down the stretch, like, Washington made some mistakes that let Texas back into that game, and even with they didn't Texas didn't get the onside kick, because what they did is they came down, Sark made the decision, we're gonna take because they were down by 9, I wanna say. Sark made the decision to take the field goal as opposed to going for it on, like, 4th and 4 or something. He's like, "Alright, I'm gonna take the field goal to save time. And because if you go for it and don't get it, the game's over at that point. So let's kick the field goal, comes out, tries onside kick, they don't get it. So they had 2 timeouts, I think, so they had to force a 3 and out. And they managed to do that. And they got a little help because a Washington player got injured. And I believe like if there's an injury, following the injury, the clock's not going to start until the ball snaps. So they lost the ability for all that time to run off on from snap to snap, and they were forced upon it. And Michigan about or no, that was the Michigan game. The Michigan game was it Michigan where the guy took the punt? Yeah, took or tried to field the punt at like the 2-yard line or something. Okay,
Yes.
so that's a different game. So, anyways, they get the punt, they drive downfield, and they had, I think, 2 or 3 shots from, like, the 10-yard line to score. I mean, they scored and
Hmm.
they kicked the extra point and they win the game. So, I really thought once they got down there, I'm like, "Dude, they're gonna win this game." Like, I if at that point in time you would have, like, said, "Hey, you have to bet on who's gonna win this game right now," I would have bet on Texas. I was convinced that they were gonna score. And, great job by Washington holding up there at the very end because, they like I said, they had kind of made it reminded me of watching the Cubs a little bit in like was it the 2004 NLCS against the Marlins, where it's like they're in control of the series, everything. It seems like they're going to coast to the World Series, and then Alex Gonzalez makes an error, makes another error. The whole Steve Bartman situation with Moises Alou. I mean, it almost felt like things were starting to happen like that in sequence for Washington, and luckily they held up when it mattered most and won the football game.
this game, much like the Pac-12 title game, was a microcosm of their season where they looked really great early, and for a while, people thought they were getting tired. And then they came back and made the plays that they had to make. That has been the story of Washington football all season long. They have made all the plays when they've had to make them, even when they're down or even when it seems like you have them down. That team is, man, they overcome adversity. They take every hit that you give them, and it's impressive to me. The performance that Michael Penix had was amazing. It's nothing short of amazing. The numbers that he put up, 400 yards in a college football playoff semifinal game, his first and possibly only one. And with all of the pressure that comes with that, it was amazing. Some of the throws he was making were just pro level throws, man. And that's not to say that Quinn Ewers on the other side wasn't doing the same thing, but Washington just looked like the better football team, even as Texas inched closer and closer. Great teams make the plays when they have to make them. And Washington has been doing it all year, even when everybody, even us, has questioned whether they're ready for this moment or whether they're getting tired. And I thought, what a beautiful way for them to go to the national championship game. The same exact way that they went to the playoff and the same exact way their season has gone. It was poetic to me.
It absolutely was, and, I'm gonna make a bold prediction. We are poised for the best the best championship game that we've had in the college football playoff era, I think. I think we are gonna have an all-timer on Monday night because there's 2 things that you hear when you hear Harbaugh and Kalen DeBoer talk, and that is that their teams are and even the players, that they are connected. They're so together. Like these are 2 teams that really seem to like the players believe in each other, that they believe in the process. Like they are all in. And I'm sure there's a lot of teams that are, but like they seem like they have that little bit of magic that you need to have a great season, to have a special season. And both these teams seem to have found that recipe. And so I think that we are seriously poised for an all-time, like, great game, a classic game on Monday night. And I'm really excited about that. And not to, I do want to mention this because I don't want to overshadow how great this game's going to be, but I'm so tired, so worn out on the anti-Michigan rhetoric in regards to, like, the whole sign stealing stuff that's still out there. That, it's the whole country against Michigan because they're a bunch of cheaters and everybody hates them and whatever. Like, even like here's the one thing we know, I would say for near certainty, is that over like, from the Big Ten championship to the college football playoff, whatever, those games, like there was no sign stealing in those games, right? Because obviously they were under the if they were doing it, which they certainly were to some degree, like it definitely had stopped, right? So they beat Ohio State without whatever this cheating situation you think they had. They beat Alabama without this cheating or whatever. And because I mean, who's going to do it right under the nose of everybody if everybody thinks you're already cheating, you think you're going to try to be as by the book as you can be. And even if they end up having to vacate it for whatever reason, do you think that, I mean, let's say that it ended up being, whatever, someone else wins the national championship because let's say they kicked Michigan out a month ago and someone else wins the national championship, or even if Michigan vacates it and they award it to Washington all of a sudden, okay, you're now considered the national champion. Washington knows who the best team in the country was this year. Everybody knows who the best team in the country was this year. And the result still took place on the field. You know what I mean? No matter what anything else, what the NCAA or whoever decides to do, like it still happened on the field and between the players. And that's all that is going to matter to those players or anybody else. I mean, yeah, fans are going to, do whatever, but I don't want any of that to overshadow, I think, how great of a game this is going to be. Here we go.
All right, I
We
have a couple
coming. You got to
things to
say we
say.
coming.
We coming. I have a couple things to say about all of this. First of all, the Michigan sign stealing stuff. We've been over this. We covered it on Iceman and Coach. We've talked about it here last week, and it is what it is. Here are the facts or at least my opinion, of what happened here. Did Michigan cheat, essentially? Sure, you could actually place that on them. Did they have employees that were doing advanced scouting, looking for advantages, absolutely. If you consider that cheating, fine, right? Maybe it goes against the integrity of the game. Michigan had the thing taken away from them that the NCAA generally tends to punish, and that is the head coach, right? And for the last, 3 games of the season, including their biggest game of the season to that point, Ohio State, they proved to the NCAA, they proved to all the haters, they proved to everybody that it doesn't matter. They're still a great football team. And I'll tell you that that was the disappointing part of the whole thing, was that they didn't need to do it. So they proved to me, and they proved to a lot of people, in my opinion, that they were better than everybody thought that they were, no matter what was happening. The other thing I want to say, too, is that if you feel that your team was not doing some type of advanced scouting like that, then you're delusional. Because this is sports. It's a big business. Professionals, amateurs, it doesn't matter. Winning is the only thing that matters in sports at these highest of levels. If you're not doing the winning, you're not employed. Period. End of story. And a lot of coaches are obsessive about getting that win. And they're obsessive about doing whatever they have to do to get that win. And so if you don't think that your coaches in all of these programs all over the country, Notre Dame even is doing advanced scouting. I'm not saying that they're cheating, but they are doing whatever they can do within bending the
They
rules
better be.
to find an
I
advantage.
hope they are.
Yes, they better be. Because if they aren't, they're falling behind. They're behind the 8 ball, and guess what? Less money for the program. Marcus Freeman gets fired. Everything gets blown to the ground, and they're going to do it all over again. That's why guys like Urban Meyer are going to continue to get hired, even though I hate it. That's why they're going to get hired, because they do all that shit in the margins to win. And what pisses me off about this is that the NCAA at some point is going to come in, because maybe they got their way, right? Maybe this is the end of it. Maybe the suspension for Harbaugh is the end of it. But the NCAA, time and time again, has come in and vacated wins, which is the absolute stupidest thing on the face of the planet. We all saw it happen on the field. We all saw it happen on the court. Reggie Bush should never have given back his Heisman, because I watched him torch Virginia Tech that year. I watched him torch all of those teams that year. The bruises didn't go away because his Heisman was taken away. It's so stupid. It's just horseshit, because the NCAA has absolutely no power anymore. So if Michigan wins the national championship, I guarantee you that the NCAA is going to be trying to find a way to vacate that national title. And it's bullshit. It's just total bullshit, because you play this shit on the field, not in the classroom. And let's just all be honest about it. It doesn't matter whether these kids get A's or not. It's not about education. They major in football. Let them play fucking football.
Yeah,
That's it.
no, you're right. And the thing,
We come.
vacating any awards, whether it's a national championship, the Heisman Trophy, whatever, vacating things after the season and everything is finished is the dumbest thing ever, because you're not taking anything meaningful away, in my opinion. The money's been made. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, literally, the best thing you could do is find them, significantly find them, take away scholarships, that sort of thing. Like, that's impactful. But what also sucks is you're gonna, like what happened at USC. You know, Pete Carroll headed up to Seattle. Those guys, the players, are off to the NFL, and you're punishing players and coaches that weren't even there and had nothing to do with it. So that's what's that. I think maybe if they moved faster, like if you wanted to act on, yeah, they acted on Michigan by suspending Jim Harbaugh for 3 games, and if they after the fact impose more serious punishments like vacating a national championship, it's just some sort of weird flex by the NCAA to try to prove they're still relevant and still have some sort of power, because it if they really believe if they believe and they had enough evidence to suspend Harbaugh to the point that that they did for 3 games, well, you should have just axed the whole program at that point in time. You should have said, hey, they are now banned from the postseason. If there was enough evidence there that you could take away a national championship after the fact, you should have just kicked them out the door from postseason eligibility at that point in time.
Yes, because it's faux power. It's not actual power anymore. The NCAA, much like the traditionalists, are seeing everything just taken away at this point. And I 100% agree with you. And people are going to say, yeah, but it takes time. Bullshit. If you know that you want to do something disciplinary-wise, do it now. You've said it about gambling in sports. If you're a sports player and you're gambling on games and you're gambling on your own team, swift, punitive penalties right away, no questions asked, because that is the penalty or that those are the rules, and that's how it should be enforced. So if you feel that the Michigan Wolverines and their program so egregiously went against the integrity of the game, handle it then, right? The NCAA didn't even handle it. The Big Ten handled it because the NCAA tried to handle it with Harbaugh with that stupid credit card thing, and it didn't work out. And so they have to find something. And it's just, as much as I love college football and as much as I love college sports, I don't love the bureaucracy of college sports. I do not at all. And the more time that goes by, when you start looking back at the stuff, like I will cop to the fact that 15 years ago, I was all about the players shouldn't get paid. I was all about the NCAA. I was a company guy. And when I look back on it now, I erred significantly because the NCAA had all those players by the balls and not in a good way. The coaches could do whatever they wanted, whatever they wanted. And I remember even before, if you transferred, you lost a year. You had to sit out. But a coach could go and immediately get on the recruiting trail and make more money and get more fame. There's just so many inequities that have taken place in the NCAA. And now they're looking at themselves as this fleeting organization, this fleeting empire that has nothing, nothing. And if they vacate this national championship because Michigan won it, there's nothing that I can do that's going to change anything, but these glasses are going to stay on permanently.
Dude, I think it's a good look, man. I think it's a good look, and I agree with everything you said. And
I'm
it's a
hot now.
funny thing, man, because it spans across everything. Um, the people in power don't want what I'm going to call the folks on the front lines, whether it's in business or in sports, having any power or control. Um, they don't want that. Look, we have a promotion in the chat. It is
We do?
nothing. It's probably a bot or something stupid, but that's just
Oh, excellent. Yeah, let's do that. Sorry for bothering us. Ooh, let's see. Anybody interested? Let's go ahead and put that there.
yeah.
Steamrise.com. Let's go ahead and get them out of here.
I just saw it pop in there. It's like wow. But yeah, I mean, they don't want the people. They don't want the folks on the front line that have any say or control or power. And um, me and my dad talk about this dynamic a lot with Bradley because their head coach he's been successful there, and I'm thankful for that. But he does not appear to be a very easy guy to play for. Um, he, I mean, he is just yanking players right after a mistake, and I mean, just visibly pissed off all the time. It seems like, and it's like you're not gonna this day and age, man. Like you don't have the control over these players that you did 5 years ago, where it's like they're gonna have to make a significant sacrifice to walk away from the program. So it's like, they're going to have to make some serious considerations if they want to fall in line or hit the road, take the sacrifice of having to sit out a year, so on and so forth. We're now like they can just go, man. And now they can go more than once currently without any penalty. And so if you don't treat them properly, they're gone. And especially in a place, in a mid-major program, like if they're very talented, you better be kissing their ass, man, because like you're sure as shit there's going to be a big bag of money somewhere else that's ready to come in and swoop them away. And so I just don't know how you can afford to be an asshole to players in this environment that currently exists.
But to bring it back to the national championship game, keeping the glasses on for now, is that I think an interesting byproduct of the paradigm today with the transfer portal and a lot more fluidity about where players can go is I think what ends up happening is the players that don't want to be there leave, and what you're left with for the most part are probably a lot of the kids that want to be there. And so Washington, Michigan both have teams that are really cohesive because this is a group of kids who all want to be where they are and are all invested in what they're doing. And if there are players that aren't happy with what's happening, they have an avenue to leave. They have an avenue to go find quote unquote gainful employment. And I think that's a good thing because ultimately it may end up making a better product for college football and college basketball, and the fact that like these players have more fluidity in where they can go. Whereas before the coach would say like, you're out of here. And if they transferred, they had to sit out a year. So there was a lot of penalties for not being invested in a program. Because think about it. If really, you're 18 years old. How much do you really know about what you want to do. Even if you're a football player, basketball player, you don't know unless you're 100% sure that that's where you want to be. Like if you're a California kid, you want to go to USC or whatever. But a lot of these kids, and Manti Te'o is a great example. Hawaii, South Bend, not exactly the same thing. And he stayed there because that's the kind of kid that he is. But would you blame him if after a year he's like, I need to transfer out to somewhere else because maybe this doesn't work for him, not even from a football perspective? I think all of that is a good byproduct of where we're headed. And if it ends up being that these national championship games are going to be like what we saw in the playoff, I'm here for it, man. Like lock, stock, and barrel.
Yeah,
I'm here.
I think a result of it, I do think ultimately it's good for the product on the field because if you think about it, it a lot of these stars that maybe would be sitting on the bench for a year or two to wait for their opportunity at the Alabamas, at the USCs, at the Michigans, Ohio States, they are going where they can play now. And so what you're seeing is like that second tier, the B tier of teams are improving because you've got very talented players going to these schools because they want to play now. And hey, if they have they're not committed to stay there. If they go have a great year at one of these schools, they can jump back up to one of these programs on the top tier, right? I mean, we just saw that with DJ Ugalele or whatever his name is. Goes from
Ui
Uli
Ungole. Get it
Ungale,
right, man.
goes from Clemson,
Thank you.
goes to what I'm going to consider a B plus program, B plus program at Oregon State. Okay, has a solid season, and so he drops down a level, and then after a great year, he's going to Florida State, right? And so right back up to the top, and that's what's available to these guys now. And so I think, and he struggled at Clemson, obviously. So it, but hey, he had the opportunity to get a fresh start, right? A clean slate, which then has given him the opportunity to step back up to, an elite program. And I think that's great that these players have that opportunity and that flexibility.
So I'm going to put you on the spot. Michigan or Washington on Monday night?
Oh boy, I'm not going to be upset either way. I'm going to go with my heart here, though. I really want to see Michigan, or excuse me, whoa, I really want to see Washington win. At this point in time, I really want to see Washington win. I think that they're going to have to do what I said I thought Alabama was trying to do. Their defense isn't very good, right? So they're going to have to try to shorten the game, limit Michigan's possessions to keep their score down, and hope that they can keep it close enough to have a shot at the end. And I think if they can do that, because Michigan has a great defense, but they're going to have a hell of a time trying to stop Washington's offense. So, I mean, Washington's going to have to. I don't think it's going to be a shootout because like I said, I think that Washington's going to try to shorten the game, and Michigan doesn't play at a super high pace to begin with. So I don't see it being a, a game in the 40s or even the high 30s. I think we're going to see something similar to what we saw between Michigan and Alabama score wise, and maybe down to the wire just like that. But I'm gonna take the Huskies, man.
I honestly think that this game is pretty even, but I do think that defense sometimes wins out more often than offense these days. And I think that Michigan comes in with such a good offense, with such a good defense, that it seems to stymie every team that they face. And as good as Washington is defensively, this is probably the best defensive team that they're going to face all year, coming in with a chip on their shoulder, finally getting over that hump. And Michigan needs this, I think, more than Washington does. And so my gut tells me that Michigan is going to win this football game, but my heart wants Washington to win this football game. So it would be awesome to see the Pac 12 win a national championship before completely imploding, and would be kind of amazing for Washington to take that national championship to the Big Ten with them next season. And if they're really petty, they'll unveil the banner when they play Michigan.
That would be hilarious. And you're spot on, man. Like I think Michigan's probably the better team of the two.
I think so.
Um, but
Top to
but
bottom.
I think that there's just more of a feel good factor to Washington winning. It's kind of a feel good story because they've been. I mean, everybody, the whole country, man, we've doubted them at every turn this season, and here they are still standing. And they seem like, I mean, I don't dislike, a lot of people just hate Michigan. I don't. A lot of Notre Dame
No.
fans hate Michigan. I don't. It's I like Jim Harbaugh. I think he's great, because he's just himself, which I love people that just own who they are. They don't. He's not. He is the least fake person ever, which is wonderful. Um, Washington seems like a bunch of good dudes that are just out there playing together, playing ball, and I don't know, man. It is. It's just kind of a feel good thing. It's like my heart wants to see Washington win this football game.
Same, but I won't be upset no matter who wins this football game. So we're going to have a banger of a game on
All
Monday night.
timer.
And Coach, yes, possibly an all timer. And Coach and I will be here to break it all down. Maybe even Monday night. Who knows if we're feeling a little bit frisky on Monday night. But I want to talk about one more college football thing, and that is the Orange Bowl. And boy, oh boy. So Florida State did not make the playoff. You and I thought it was the right decision, even if it was unfair, let's say. Florida State came into this game with a completely unfair disadvantage with all the players that they had transfer out and everything. And Georgia, to their credit, obviously had players transferring out, but came to play, wanted to win this football game. So the long and the short of it is that Georgia wins 63-3, and just not what the Orange Bowl wants, not what viewers want. But I don't know if you know this, man, but it is, I think,
Is what I want. I'm
go
saying
ahead.
it was what I want.
I know you wanted him to set him back, but I think it was the most watched college football bowl game that wasn't a playoff game in something like 20 years or something like that. So people tuned in to see what was going to happen. I assume most of them in and around the Tallahassee area. What I took away from this game is Florida State was in a position that was kind of unfair, right? Because the playoff committee didn't select them, and the way that college football works, you can opt out and all these different things. But then when I thought about it more, I really was like, well, okay, so if you're Florida State and you get snubbed by this playoff, not every single one of those kids that opted out is probably going to go to the NFL. A lot of them probably opted out because they just like, I don't want to play in some game that's not a playoff game. And that part sucks if it's true. Because if I were on Florida State, I'd want to defend my honor and say, no, we deserved to be in the playoff because that's what Georgia did. Georgia defended the fact that they weren't in there. And I'll tell you what, man, Georgia proved that I think they could have beat any one of the four teams that was in that field with the way that they played the other
Yeah,
day.
Georgia's the only team that's not in that field that could
Deserved
have
to be in
belonged.
that field.
Could have hung in
They
that field. They
belonged.
belonged.
Yeah.
Um, and I agree, man. Like Florida State, like they took their ball and went home, right?
Yes.
Is what
It felt
they
that way.
pouted, I guess. And yeah, they put the kids that did show up that day in a really terrible position. And now this is a little bit of hyperbole or whatever you want to call it, but the argument from Florida State when they got left out was, well, missing players shouldn't matter. Well, we just saw that missing players matters a lot. Now, granted, you were missing a lot of players, okay? So,
Yeah.
but I mean, yeah, you guys, because well, we have depth, we're deep, we're this. I mean, you're not that deep, and
Clearly.
you know what I mean? Because yeah, clearly you're not. But it's as much as I'm very happy that Georgia took care of business, and due to the circumstances, it's not going to shut up anybody uh, from Florida State because they were missing so many players. And I don't think you can make a judgment on how good or bad that team was based off that game, but I think you can judge their character a little bit because of the fact that, like I said, they took their ball and went home. And, since they couldn't have, what they wanted, they weren't going to give an effort into what they got. And Georgia did, like you said. I do think that they need to make some changes to the system as far as when the transfer portal opens and recruiting and everything. They need to make changes so that these rosters can remain intact throughout the entirety of the postseason because it just throws stuff. I mean, what with coach? I mean, because that's the reason coaching changes happen so soon because of the recruiting piece.
Yeah, they need to get right on the recruiting train.
And I think if we just there's no I don't think there's any reason you can't push it all back. Maybe because of the school side of it with the semesters and getting kids enrolled, possibly that has something to do with it. Getting them in there in time to get admitted before the second semester starts.
That's very possible.
but I think you could even adjust the schedule in ways to meet that. Because what we're doing now, I have no problem with the transfer portal, but
Mm.
the way it's being handled right now, the way it fits is just not it's not good.
And see, what I want to avoid is being the boomer guy that says you should play because you owe it to the school and blah, 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 blah. But I wish that there was something that incentivized players to want to participate in these bowls, especially like Florida State. I agree that money is going to come down to it, but I'm saying like the amount of a stink that was made because Florida State was left out by a vast majority of Florida State fans, even Florida State alumni were making the argument that they were snubbed. And you and I both agree that while maybe that was the case in terms of fairness, the right call was made. And I think that it is somewhat fair to say that Florida State's performance in the Orange Bowl, while flawed because they were missing so many players, to me is more of an indictment on, as you said, the character of the team. And maybe that's unfair because I'm in a tough place here because I want to say that look at that, Florida State's a soft program because they didn't show up, and they were pouting, as you said, but also the business side of it, these players, these kids, like they've got to look out for their own ass. And so how do you balance these two things? You know what I'm saying? Because you and I don't think are boomer people. Like you said it, right? Hartman, he did not play in the bowl game because he was preparing to, maybe be drafted or whatever. But you also said, like, what would be the point of him playing in this bowl game? He's given enough to the university. And not all of the kids that opted out of the bowl game for Florida State had given everything to Florida State. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know. I mean, didn't Brock Bowers play in this game? And he has an NFL future to worry about
Yeah, he did, and that's
for first
sure,
half.
and that's I mean, in the Hartman case, like, and sorry, Johnny Irish fan, like, Sam Hartman doesn't owe you anything, uh, and I think that I'll say this, man, if Florida State would have come out and taken it to Georgia, it would have given me some pause in defending my
Sure,
position on them not belonging in the playoff. I would have been like, "All right, man, well, wait a minute, um, maybe I was wrong," but the fact that the game got handled in the way it did told me everything I needed to know about Florida State and the way that
I
that
agree.
program's
I,
run.
I felt the same way. Like watching it, my father in law was like, "Aren't you glad they didn't make it in the playoff?" And as a casual viewer, I was like, "Yes," because we would have been robbed of the two games that we ended
Yeah.
up having. Because the game that Florida State played in would not have looked like either of those games at all.
No, you're 100% correct. We would have had a blowout. Even with their 20 whatever guys, it just they were not the same team. With you asked me, you said, "Do you think any of the other teams would have been left out if their quarterback was injured?"
Which is a
Yeah.
fair question because if we made the argument that Florida State shouldn't be out, and the committee did because the quarterback was out, that was one of the factors, would that have applied to the other teams? I would like to think that it
So, like,
would.
let's say that if Jordan Travis had not gotten injured and Michael Penix did, and both of them went undefeated, we had the same exact scenario happen. I think Washington would have been left out,
I do too.
like 100%. And I think it would have been the right decision.
I
Like,
agree.
even if they would running the table, winning the Pac-12, beating Oregon twice, whatever, I think it would have been the right call. Even if he got hurt on the last play, if he broke his leg on the last play of the Pac-12 championship game where it was certain he wasn't going to be available for the playoff, like, they probably would have left them out, and that would have been the right decision. I get that that hurts people's feelings, but that is just the
It ain't about
truth,
their
man. No,
feelings
it's
though.
about
Like
putting
it's
the 4 teams that are the most equipped to compete for a national championship in the playoff,
thank
period,
you.
man, like, and same thing, Quinn Ewers, like, they would have been even easier for them to leave them out
Oh,
because of the
please.
loss, but the Alabama thing really screwed everything, and that's really what threw a wrench in things, but
But the thing is, though, there's no way Alabama is beating Georgia without Jalen Milrow. Absolutely zero way that they're beating Georgia. So it would have to be that Milrow got hurt in a win in the SEC title game. You know what I mean? Like it would have to be one of those scenarios
sure.
because if he got hurt when Jordan Travis got hurt, ain't no
Right,
way.
right.
Ain't no
But,
way
yeah, no,
like that's
you're
happening.
correct. But I'm saying Alabama winning that game
It did. It
I
was the
is what
most chaotic
but
thing
what
that
that did
happened.
Alabama and Texas were connected in this whole thing, right? Because Texas beat Alabama, and so it was like if you put Alabama in, you got to put Texas in. But I think they could have justified leaving Texas out if Quinn Ewers was hurt, right? And if JJ McCarthy
Yeah,
was hurt, I think you would say that that's the one that might have been the most difficult because, in my opinion, they they have been the best team in the country all year for the reasons we talked. Now they didn't play a great schedule and so on and so forth, but
whatever.
they did what they had to do against teams that were in front of them, you know, and they proved Monday they belong in the playoff and right as the number one seed. But that one would have been interesting because, they would have beaten a full strength Ohio State in the Big Ten title game, and but like maybe without him, maybe they don't, and that's what changes things. And you can't tell me that well, that's no different than Florida State sneaking by Louisville in the ACC championship because it's a lot different. Um,
It is a
that
lot
was the
different.
least contested on paper of all of the major conference championship games.
Yeah, if you think about the conference championship games, Washington played Oregon, easily one of the top 8 teams in the country. Michigan played Iowa, whatever.
Yeah, I
I
guess that was
mean,
not okay, yeah, that one wasn't contested, but basically, yeah, I
right.
think Michigan, Ohio State was a de facto.
Michigan, that was,
Yeah,
yes, exactly. But, and then, of course, Texas didn't play anybody, but they blew them out. So that, they play Kansas State, they blew them out, or Oklahoma State, excuse me. They blew them out. So that's what you wanted to see. A team that's far superior to the other. You want to see a blowout. But like they're not Louisville. And also Georgia. Let's not forget
sure.
number one team in the country, 2-time national champion. Blah 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 blah. And I think that Louisville was not that.
No.
Could you say, all right, Louisville probably better than Iowa, only because that they would have scored more than 10 points. Probably better than Oklahoma State, but Oklahoma State beat some pretty good teams this year. So in a one game sample, you never know. It's not as if Louisville went gangbusters on a ton of great teams this year. Like, you know what I mean? And that's why I think that the quarterback thing, when I asked you, I was like, in my mind, I was like, I'm onto something here because that's the key to the argument. Would all of the teams that got in be left out if their quarterback had been injured? And I do think the answer would have been yes, because it's fundamental to what the selection criteria is. But to bring it back before we move on to another one of your favorite people, it made me sad to see Florida State get blown out this way, only because it is a sign of where we are, and I don't know how to fix it. I just wish that Florida State showed up and defended themselves. If they went and still lost and they had almost their full complement of players, cool. But it felt like you're right. They took their ball and they went home, and I have no respect for that. I have no respect for not defending all of the hate that you've been throwing at the selection committee because you feel like you got
Yeah,
jobbed.
one thing that, like, the boomer generation for sure does not want to accept is that has taken team pride, school pride has taken a back seat to profit, and self-interest.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, though, like, there's a hell of a lot more money at stake now than there was 30, 40, 50 years ago. And I get it's easy for us idiots that sit on the couch every weekend and watch these games and say, "I would give anything to be on that field," or whatever, but, like,
I
dude,
wouldn't.
like, these guys, you're talking about risking life-changing money for generational wealth in some cases.
For a lot of these kids,
You know
yes.
what I
And
mean?
families, is
Yes.
generational wealth.
And you are talking about risking that to play in, I'm gonna say it, man, a meaningless game. An exhibition game is what it is. You have nothing to gain from playing in that game at all.
Fair.
Um,
Fair.
your performance in that game is not going to improve, most likely is not going to improve your draft stock or whatever else, because of the fact that other players aren't playing and whatever. It's just the game is so weird. It's like it's a preseason game. It's an exhibition game. It's not a accurate depiction of reality in most cases. And now I don't like it. I would love to see as fans. We of course we want to see the best version of these teams play each other. 100% as fans, that's what we want. But don't blame the players for the system that allows this. The system needs to change. If you want to see these players playing in these games and you want to see all this, we need to change the system so that it facilitates it, whether it's putting uh lucrative purses on winning the game for each player, or I mean, really, that'd be the biggest motivator in my opinion. And then, like I said, moving the transfer portal window and things like that. But it's a system problem. It is not a individual issue. But the mass exodus that we saw at Florida State did leave a bad taste in my mouth. I'll say that.
Speaking of things that leave a bad taste, let's talk about your Detroit Lions for a minute. Do you want to move on to
Oh gosh,
MCDC and the
sure,
hapless Detroit
yes.
Lions right now? Okay, so Saturday football is a regular thing during the holidays because apparently we just need football spread out as much as possible. So the Lions and the Cowboys played in almost every other year between now and like 1950. This game would have been completely meaningless because only one team was actually good. But both the Lions and Cowboys came into this game in a weird sense of both needing this game, right? So the game actually is pretty sloppy. It very much reminded me of the Michigan Alabama game, even though I hadn't seen that, but thinking back on it, Lions had opportunities, Cowboys had opportunities. Neither one of them seemed like they were going to take a hold of this game. Many things take place. And at the end of the game, the Lions get the ball and they have no timeouts. They march right down the field. They score a touchdown. And Dan Campbell, as he had done most of the games, said, I'm going to go for two, win this game. I got to tell you, in the moment, I love the balls, love the moxie. And the play happens. It's a big man touchdown to a lineman. Yay, rejoice. The Lions are going to win the football game, and it's going to change their trajectory to the number 2 seed. And then the flag comes up, and it turns out ineligible touching or illegal touching because the man who caught the touchdown supposedly did not report. And it has been a swirl of controversy since then, but I have a couple of thoughts, but I want to let you get your initial thoughts out because I think that there's a lot of things, a lot of layers that have come, and I have kind of changed my viewpoint over the last couple days. So, Coach, the floor is yours for your Detroit Lions.
All right. This was an absolute genius play. And this play was being set up the entire game. Okay. Absolute genius play design, play build up, play setup. All right. And the reason that is like the more you dig into the play, the more you realize how intentional and how smart it was. All right. And Dan Campbell was the smartest guy on that field that night, man. Like, cause this play, genius. So, number 70, Skipper, was reporting as eligible all night long, nonstop, constantly reporting as eligible. So they get in and they get into the 2-point situation. And the plan is that 58 or 68, Decker, he was the one that caught the touchdown, right? So he had to
Yes,
report. But their strategy was Skipper was running on the field from the sideline. They wanted him to run at the official to give the impression that he was again reporting, but not say anything, not get too close to the official. Um, and also Dan Skipper, number 68, would be over there at the same time. And I think Panay Sewell actually ended up over there too for whatever reason.
he did.
And report, have Decker report as eligible. And so in order to attempt to confuse the defense, even though the official announces who is reported as eligible. But if you can create some sort of confusion in the defense's mind, even if they, if you're used to hearing 70, 70, 70, so all night long you have your eyes on 70, you were hoping that the defense would have made the mistake that the official made, basically getting himself programmed to hear one thing and just locking in on that despite reality. So what happened was the official 68 reports, but he goes and tells the defense 70 reports because that's what he's been telling them all night long. And he's it's ingrained in him at that point too. So not only did Dan Campbell and the Lions trick the Cowboys, but they tricked the official. Is what it amounts to. And then, man, there's some other wrinkles to this that are just like, and what's so crazy too is Dan Skipper was lined up at like guard. So like it was very, I mean, he was not even in a position where he could be considered an eligible receiver. Uh, But one of the things they did in this play that was genius, because my dad tried to debate this with me at one point. There were some people that tried to say that the tackle, the Decker was covered up by a receiver. So the only eligible receivers on the line of scrimmage is the most outer guy lined up on the line of scrimmage. And then if there's someone, so there are different formations. So like typically the tackle obviously is on the line of scrimmage, and you'd have a receiver that's on the line of scrimmage. He would be so, and by him being on, he's covering up the tackle, which means the tackle is not eligible. Only the end man on the line of scrimmage is eligible, plus whoever is in the backfield off of the line of scrimmage. So what they did is they had two receivers to the side of Decker. The outside receiver lined up 2 yards off the line of scrimmage, and they had the inside receiver line up only 1 yard off the line of scrimmage. So he was off the line of scrimmage, but like at first glance, and there's video of him verifying with the official, with the linesman, that hey, they look and say, hey, I'm lined up off the line of scrimmage, or if they want to be on, they verify that they're on the line of scrimmage, because you have to have 7 guys on the line of scrimmage. So they lined up the outer guy 2 yards off the line of scrimmage, lined up the inner guy 1 yard off the line of scrimmage, giving the visualization that he was maybe on the line of scrimmage covering up the tackle. You know what I mean? So it's like he wasn't, but because of what they did with the outer guy, creating that disparity, it made it look like he was on, possibly, uh, which would have made the tackle ineligible. So like the whole play design, freaking genius. And the coaches communicate all of this. Any potential trick plays, like they communicate this to the officials before the game, even to the extent of drawing the plays up physically on paper. Um, when I coached high school football, even like sophomore high school football, they would ask, like the officials would come over, like while we were warming up, like, hey, coach, I'm so and so, blah, 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 blah. Any trick plays, any special formations that we need to know about. And you would tell them, they'd be like, oh, okay, well, we have this, or we try to do this, or we may do this at one point in time. This is what we're trying to do. And you communicate that so that the officials don't get confused and blow it for you. You know what I mean? And, but in this situation, that's exactly what happened. And this particular crew, the Brad Allen crew, has been uh, at the center of multiple um, missed and controversial calls this season. They got downgraded from the playoffs, which I'm sure that's meaningful to some degree, but there certainly needs to be some more significant punishment of some sort for mistakes like this, because I mean they theoretically, man, they could have cost the Lions the number 1 seed possibly. I mean, they would have had a path to the 1 seed if they win that game. All right, I'm gonna sit back and enjoy.
Okay, so in the moment, I had thoughts about this, and I think that they're still valid, but I want to lay them out here. So the first thing is first, okay? The Detroit Lions, I thought, deserved to win that football game, and I felt like the referees in that moment didn't understand the situation. But I think that it's more complicated than that, because I think that there are criticisms that could be laid throughout the entirety of it. But I want to say this about NFL officiating, and I'm looking at you, Roger Goodell. The officiating across the board this season has just gotten precipitously worse. And this is not the first incident. It won't be the last. I'm sure that we will see something in the playoffs controversial. But this particular crew in general, this is not their first offense. They've been doing this all season long. And even within this game, they missed or messed up calls. That tripping call should not have been on the Cowboys. It should have been on Aiden Hutchinson. And there were some missed pass interference calls. They've been under scrutiny all season long. And I'm going to tell you something, that if I'm under that kind of scrutiny for my performance at my job, I'm probably not going to have my job for very long. But this is also a larger discussion that needs to be had about refereeing. These are all part-time gigs. I understand that. They have a union, fine. But I think that there needs to be a more professional crew. I think that officiating needs to be as good as it can be, where these guys are basically paid to do just this. If we're going to make this sport as lucrative as it is, if we're going to put the kind of stakes that we're putting on it, I feel like the referees need to be held to the same standard. And it's not consistent. We've seen a lack of consistency in officiating the last few seasons, and I think that it's getting worse. But back to the Detroit Lions for a second. So I initially felt like the kind of play call that they had in that 2-point conversion was the kind of play call that you'd make if you're not used to winning. But I think that that was the wrong assessment of that particular play. But when I look at the game plan as a whole, Dan Campbell went for it on 4th down quite a few times and did not decide to take points in certain situations. Now, I understand that the analytics and those things are going to tell you what is the most prudent thing to do. They lost by a point. And so I can understand being aggressive. I think you need to be aggressive, especially on the road in certain circumstances. But you can make the argument that he did it a little bit too much and that he maybe cost them opportunities to get points that maybe would have mattered come the end of this game. And so I think that it's fair to say that the referees messed this call up. They changed the trajectory of the Lions, they changed the trajectory of the NFC, and call and bring them to task for being better at their job. But I also think that you could say that maybe Dan Campbell, as great of a coach as he is turning out to be, is still not quite used to winning. And that may come to bite them in the playoffs. I think that that's fair to say this because I think all of it can be true, right? I mean, we talk about Brandon Staley and say, oh, he's too cute, goes for it too often on 4th down. And, read your team and all that stuff. And again, being aggressive, A plus. But I think sometimes the idea of being aggressive in today's NFL comes at the detriment of sometimes just doing what you have to do to win the football game. End of rant.
All right, I don't have any fancy sunglasses to put on, but I think if the Lions have played that way all year, you could say, you could claim, you didn't say this, but I'm paraphrasing for you a little bit. Put some words in your mouth. You could claim desperation if they all of a sudden, like this is the first time they've decided that they're going to play this way. But they've played this way all year long. You could argue that if they didn't play this way, they may not even be in the situation that they're in right now. Their record could be worse. If their aggressiveness, I would. I'm not going to take the time to do this, but I'm sure you could go back maybe and try to identify like, you know, how many wins maybe their aggressiveness has gotten them, or help. Maybe it's cost them wins. I don't know, but uh, I think that they played within their system, man. That's how they play the game. It's what they do, and that's what they did in that moment. Now, I think it's fair to be critical of them still going for 2 after the initial 5-yard penalty from the 7-yard line. That was a little silly. I think that was more of an emotional decision out of frustration than it was a actual logical, like, in like choice. Um, but but then still there was the penalty. They got the ball back at the 2-yard line again. So weird finish.
But that's what I'm getting at, though, man, is like you say it was silly to go for it even after that's emotional decision. But that's what I'm talking
You
about is like,
can't say it
yes, they
doesn't
played
change when
within.
she moved to the 7-yard line though. Like the calculus changes at that point. Like
Of course it does, but I mean, you're saying it's an emotional decision, and that's what I'm talking about with a team like the Lions, a franchise who's not used to winning and not used to playing winning football, is that every so often during the season as these things are going along, you're going to see these kinds of things happen. And yes, they played within their system and they've been aggressive all season. I have no issue with that. But again, you live or you die by that. And Dan Campbell has been really defensive this week when asked about how many times he went for it on 4th down and all these different things. And it's like, he doesn't sound to me like he's living and dying by it. He really sounds like he's pissed off that you're even asking him. You know what I'm saying?
well, the thing is like I mean, like he's the decision that that's how they were going to play the game wasn't made in the middle of the game, right? Like they had made that choice philosophically as a football team that that's how they're going to operate. Like that, so that's what they do, man. Like it's not like you can see many examples throughout the season of where they've done this. Like them going for 2 the first time when the penalty occurred, that was a philosophical decision. Them
And I loved
them
it.
going for 2 from the 7-yard line was a knee-jerk emotional decision, okay? In the heat of the moment, probably on the heels of the bad call, um, and that is that, in my opinion, is the decision that could be most criticized of anything. That, that's where you could cite inexperience on that decision. But they've made that decision that they're gonna live and die by you know being aggressive. It's not like I said, it's not like they just chose in this one game that they were suddenly going to be aggressive and they hadn't been all year in every other game. We talk about, you make the comment where you say that teams are it appears that you can tell they're not used to winning because this is what teams that aren't used to winning do. Like, does that mean that the Philly special was because the Eagles aren't used to winning? Because that was a trick play that
No,
won the
no, no,
Super
no,
Bowl.
no. No, I'm talking about like you can have a game plan, right? And you can go into the game with this game plan, but sometimes you have to adjust on the fly. So, how many times do you have to go for it on fourth down inside the 10-yard line and come away with nothing before you think maybe just one of those times I switch up what I'm doing? That's what I'm saying. And that's the kind of thing where you talked about Tommy Reese earlier and how he is stubborn to the point where he wrote up this play, so it's going to work the way that I say it. Dan Campbell is probably the same exact way. He's probably like, this is a solid game plan, and it's gotten us to where we are today. But sometimes in those micro moments, maybe we have to adjust the game plan a little bit, is what I'm saying, right? And that's what I'm criticizing. I'm not criticizing them being aggressive. I'm not criticizing them sticking to their guns and being that way. I'm criticizing in this particular game, this one micro vacuum game of watching them go for it on fourth down and take away points possibly. And I understand there's a high reward that could come with this, but how many times do you go for it, miss it, and come away with nothing before you make a different decision? And that's all
Okay,
that I'm
that's so
saying.
you're talking about, like, earlier in the game, like,
Yeah, earlier in the game,
if
not
they
at
take a field goal as opposed to going forward on, 4th down.
doesn't guarantee
Sure.
anything, but I'm saying that like you might change a little bit of what happens later if you
So,
do this, is
let
what
me
I'm
ask a
saying.
question. So, obviously, if they go for 2 and they get it, that penalty never happens. The play
Sure.
is properly officiated. No one is questioning the fact that he's going for 2. No after the fact, no one's
Mm-mm.
saying, like, "I don't know if I would have done that," you know what I mean? Like,
No, of course not.
and I think you could even argue is even though I'm critical of the decision to go for it, if they would have gotten it on the from the 7-yard line, I don't think you would have heard anybody being like, "That was a really dumb decision." Like,
I might have said it. I might have said, "Ooh, I didn't like that, but
but it
oh, it
worked
worked
out,
out."
sure, but I think that there would not have been the heat. It would have been more of a joke, right? Like a punchline, I guess, as opposed to a real criticism of some kind. I liked how that one interview I sent you where he was on, like, local Detroit radio, I think, and the
Yes,
guy's
where he's like,
trying to very eloquently ask him why he made the decision to go for it the second time after the penalty, and Dan Campbell's like, "Just say what you wanna say. Just
"Yep,
ask it
I
the way
heard
you wanna
that. Yep."
ask it." And the guy's like he's like, "Dude," he's like, "I'm telling you, just say it. Just say what you mean." And the guy's like, "Well, I thought it was reckless and whatever," and, like, but he's like, "See, wasn't that hard?" Like, you know
No, he said,
yeah,
"Thank
yeah,
you."
he was like, I and, like, that's what I love about that guy, man, like, is that he's not he's defending his decisions, which is fine, but he's not shying away from the criticism either, I think he fully believes in the decisions he made, which is fine, but he's also not telling you that you're not allowed. He's I don't know, he's not avoiding you trying to tell him your opinion on it, I mean, which I
No.
appreciate, and I'll admittedly, through all of this Detroit Lions talk, like, it's so funny because 'cause I've never ever in my life, like, given 2 shits about the Detroit Lions, but I am, like, firmly on the Detroit Lions bandwagon, man, like, and so I'm probably looking at this with a little bit of bias, for sure.
But that's why I'm so passionate about it is because I'm watching this game, and while I'm watching it with 4 Cowboys fans, I wanted the Lions to win because they're fun, and it's fun that they are good. And it's not as fun as the Browns for some reason, even though you could say that the same thing, but, like, everything that the Lions bring is great for football, and it's great viewing and all of that. That's why I was just I was critical of the game plan when it came to certain moments, but again, the Lions, I think, they played they didn't play well enough to win per se. Like both teams kind of played like crap. And I said that either one of these performances against a better team is you're gone in the playoffs. And so that's why I was disappointed, but what disappoints me more is the playoff picture now is so different because of this one call. And I mean, other things took place. The Eagles had to lose to the lowly Cardinals and all these different things. But like, we're headed into this week, and there's a lot of things that are certain, but there's a lot of things that are uncertain. But the NFC playoff picture is vastly different. Like, the Lions may end up having to play at Dallas again instead of the other way around. And the Lions are a completely different football team away from Ford Field than they are at home. And you want to have as many advantages as possible. And when we look at this season, if the Lions do not win the Super Bowl, that game could end up being one of those games where we say, okay. And I would like to think that Dan Campbell is smart enough to look back and say, all right, I stuck to my guns and that's great, but here are some of the consequences that came away with it. And then the next season, you make some tweaks because I'd like to think that some of the best coaches of all time didn't just do everything the way that they have always done it all the time, no matter what. There has to be some change, there has to be some evolution. That's all that I was arguing.
No, that's fair. We got super fan Jonah in here. Nice to see you, Jonah. Thanks for stopping by,
Oh, very
man.
good.
Um, I don't you yeah, I don't know if you've been here the whole time or if you just popped in. Uh, Curious what else you could have to do on a Friday night that's more important than being here with us for the duration of the show.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, that's
no,
very
thanks
true.
for popping in. Yeah, it's weird, man. I do love, we root for controversy here, and so I'm it's fun that there's so much up in the air going into the last week of the regular season. Um, I enjoy that, and so it'll be interesting to see how things shake out. And but yeah, the fact that that one single call, especially this late in the year and such an important game for the playoff picture occurred and could really have a significant impact that uh, goes far beyond just the Lions, and who it impacts. So, um, I, my dad said that there was people out there that were calling for, Goodell has the power to overturn this. And it's like,
No, we're not
no,
doing
you
that.
can't, you
It's
can't do that,
ridiculous.
man. Like,
The glasses will come back on if he does some shit like
y-
that because it is what it is. The call has been made. The game is
yeah,
over.
you
It is what
can't.
it it's 4 quarters of action. It's not just that one play. We talked about that with Kadarius Toney, litany of plays. But this is how chaotic things are. So I'm just going to go very, very briefly over this. This weekend, we have a handful of teams that are in it, and I'm just going to very quickly go through the scenarios for some of these teams. I'm leaving out ties and so forth because rarely is there ties in the NFL. Rarely are there multiple ties. So I'm just considering that a non-factor. So the Houston Texans come in, they win and they're in, which is crazy to me because I had them pinned as one of the worst teams in the league. CJ Stroud is probably
It's
the
been
rookie of
really
the
good.
year. D'Amico Ryan is probably the coach of the year. And if they make the playoffs, it's amazing. It's an amazing turnaround for that team. Lots of potential. They are playing your Indianapolis Colts, who, despite middle of the road quarterback play from Gardner Minshew, he has tried to hand the ball to the defense a lot this season. They are 9 and
All
7,
part of the
and if they
strategy.
win, they're in. So the Colts could be in as well, and I think you'd have to. I can't remember their coach's name, but I think they
I
got
don't
him
know.
from. I,
I did he
I
come
don't
from
know.
Did he come from Philly too? I don't know his name either.
That's
Did he come
great.
from
That's
Philly also?
fantastic. I don't know. Super Colts fan here,
Dude,
coach with out another
I'm
coach
a
thing. Who
very
cares?
surface level Colts fan
That's
anymore.
fine.
I know more about the fucking Detroit Lions than I know about the Colts.
Here you go. So Colts win and they're in. The Steelers can be in if they win and they get a loss by either the Jags or the Bills. Now the Steelers are playing the Ravens, who have locked up the number 1 seed. Probably going to be resting a lot of guys. Although that NFC North football, man, you know what I'm saying? Like, excuse me, the AFC North football, gritty football. Ravens might want to play just hard enough to get the Steelers out of the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, it's it'll be interesting because it's like, yeah, they don't need the win, but it's a rivalry game, man. Like, and I think that we've seen over the years too that sometimes resting guys does not bode well for certain teams.
A lot of guys resting this weekend, which everybody's resting, so I'll be curious how that works out in the playoffs. But it's been a long season, so I think everybody just needs the break. The Jags are playing the Titans in what could be Mike Vrabel's last game. And if they win, they're in and they win the division. But I could see Mike Vrabel wanting to be spoiler so bad.
Did you see his press conference? I'll have
No,
to
what did he
he
say?
was Pat McAfee had it on his show. Mike Vrabel's in a press conference. Some reporter asks him, like, basically, "What's your motivation?" I'm assuming, I don't think I heard the question. I'm assuming the question was something like, "What's your motivation to try to win this game?" And, like, Mike Vrabel's like, because losing effing sucks." Somebody said, he's like so pissed, man. And like some other reporter asked a question, he just ignores it. He's like, "Do you have any other interesting thoughts you want to share with us, like, to this report?" And he just repeats it like 4 times, like, losing freaking sucks. Um, these guys work their tails off. And so it's really important to me to put them in a position to win these football games so their effort is worthwhile, and blah blah blah. I mean, he's just teeing off on this guy. It was wonderful.
Poor guy. Last game in the AFC that matters, I think they have flexed it to Sunday night, is Bills Dolphins. Now, you're a big Mike McDaniel guy, but the Dolphins have definitely lost a little bit of that flash. I think a lot of the teams have caught up to them, and they're playing the Bills, who are trending upward. Now, this game is in Miami, and the Dolphins win. They're already in the playoffs. They win the division. Bills win. They win the AFC East and are in. If the Bills lose, one of three things could happen. They could either be the 5 seed, they could be the 6 seed, or they could be out entirely. So the Bills need to win this football game because they do not want to leave it up to other teams, which is really the theme of this last week in the NFL. That's the most interesting one to me because I feel like Dolphins are in, but they're backing in. They kind of need this win to get some of that momentum back, but I don't know if they have it in them, even though James picked them earlier.
No, you might be right, and I think we've seen multiple times over the years that it seems like whoever's playing their best football at this time of year really carries that momentum into the postseason, and as opposed to like backing in, as you say. And then I have a question. So the Bills, I feel like they're one of those teams that, like, their window is closing, right? I mean,
I think we talked
yeah,
about
their
that too.
window is closing, and yeah, Josh Allen's going to be there probably for a long time, but their window of having, the payroll and everything else to keep these pieces together to try to continue making these runs is closing, I think. And, we had some drama in Buffalo with Stephon Diggs and things like that this year. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, especially if somehow they don't make the playoffs. I'm curious where things go from there.
I heard very interesting analysis of Josh Allen today, and it was Mina Kimes. I was listening to her. And she said, at this point, I don't think it's really up to what the defense does with Josh Allen. I think it's just what version of Josh Allen are you going to get in this game? Because there's the Josh Allen who's been playing the last few weeks, and then there's the YOLO ball Josh Allen who just does reckless stuff. And is that going to be the guy who shows up on a weekly
It's like Brett
basis?
Favre.
It kind
It's
of,
a
but
little
also more athletic. Less money laundering and things like that. But my point is Josh Allen is kind of like where the Bills have put their flagpole, and they kind of just sway whichever way Josh Allen is swaying at that moment in time. And you're right, he probably will be there, but man, that feels like such a shaky proposition because could you get an entire season of Josh Allen playing YOLO ball? If he doesn't have the talent around them, it's up to him to be the guy. Now, that's one thing about Josh Allen that's different from Mahomes. Mahomes has obviously turned the ball over this year, but it's been because his receivers can't catch a ball. It's not been because he's still throwing into tight windows. He's making dumb mistakes. He's being reckless. It's because the rest of his team isn't very good. Whereas Josh Allen sees, oh, my talent isn't as good right now. I've got to take it on my back, and I'm just going to do whatever it takes. The YOLO ball Josh Allen is not good. And it'll be interesting, I agree, because I don't know what's going to happen with Diggs. If they have an early exit, it's only going to continue to fuel the fire because they, like Michigan, have not gotten over the hump. All the hype that we have given them, they've not been able to win the biggest of games yet. They're going to have to prove that they can do it. This game is one of those steps. They've not had an issue beating the Dolphins, really, over the last few seasons. It's once they get there, can they beat the Ravens? The rest of the AFC is kind of flawed, and anything is kind of up for grabs, but they've got to make it. They've got to at least make it to the AFC Championship game. They have to. That's what I think.
Yeah, and I don't think that, despite his flaws, I don't think that you see them moving off of Josh Allen anytime soon. No,
No, no,
but
no,
just
no.
because we've seen, right, how difficult it is to get a franchise quarterback,
Absolutely.
and not doing so, taking a gamble on a guy, whatever, could really set you back, significantly if, a miss, in the draft. So, but yeah, you gotta keep things together, and you can't have him go rogue and shit go off the rails either. So it will be interesting to see, like you mentioned, what version of Josh Allen we get, and if for some reason they do have an early exit or don't make the playoffs at all, possibly, what transpires at that point.
So as we head to the NFC, the Cowboys have the Commanders this week. My wife might be at the game. They win, and they win the division to the number 2 seed. The Eagles need the Cowboys to lose, but if they beat the Giants and the Cowboys lose, pretty much they are in as well. The Bucks need to win essentially to get in because they need a lot of other things to happen if they lose. Luckily, though, they're playing the Panthers, so that should not be an easy. That should be an easy thing to do. The Falcons need a win plus a Bucks loss, Falcons or whatever. The Saints need a win and some other losses, so they need the most help, but they are playing the Falcons, so that's two middling teams. Seahawks need a win and a Packers loss. The Seahawks are playing the Cardinals, and the Packers win and they're in. However, they are playing the Bears, who sneaky better than we thought they were.
Yeah, but they're so inconsistent.
They
That's
are.
been their problem. I think I saw something the other day where somebody that's knows players or knows somebody that's, connected, source close to the franchise, okay, that says they don't plan on moving off of Justin Fields. So I don't have a problem with that. I know that there's some people that feel strongly that the Bears should move off of him. I I think you gotta give the recipe for disaster for a lot of these young quarterbacks, and we've seen it happen time and time again, is they don't give them there's no consistency around them, whether it's coaching changes, personnel changes. I mean, some of these guys are just not set up for success. And I think you have to have some sort of stability to really make a fair evaluation of a quarterback's talent, especially a guy like Fields who has showed flashes. Uh, and it's not like he's not Brady Quinn, that's just not very good at the pro level or something. I mean, the guy has shown flashes. He can play at that level. I think it's just a consistency thing.
Yes, I definitely agree with you. Now, just to do a little bit of looking ahead, so the Bears have clinched the number 1 pick vis-a-vis the Panthers. Now, I was talking about this with my dad the other day about best case scenario from a Patriots perspective. So the Bears, if your reporting is correct, use reporting in the lightest of terms, but if that is correct and the Bears are not going to move off from Justin Fields and they don't need a quarterback, what they do need
Maserati
is
Marv.
offense. Yes. So you're, yes. But if you think about it, the Bears are smart. They try to entice one team in probably the top 4 to move up because Marv is not going to be there. There's no way he's probably there at 5 you know what I mean? Like he's that good. So they can't really mess around with moving down too far. And the best case scenario to me for the Patriots is if the Bears can convince the Commanders, who right now hold the number 2 pick, to move up one spot. And it's not out of the realm of possibility with a new owner, new ownership group. They want to start fresh. So the Commanders give up the entire farm to move up. Bears move down to number 2. The Commanders take whatever quarterback that they want. I have this strange feeling that if that were to happen, they would pick Jaden Daniels from LSU because he's the flashy guy now. And then Marv goes number 2, which I think is actually a really smart pick for the Bears. To be perfectly honest with you, that's a home run pick for the Bears. And the Patriots, if they're still at number 3, they have the Jets this week, so that might not still be true. They have the run of the litter basically after that. They can pick anybody that they want that is not whoever the Commanders took. I think that's the smartest move for the Bears, but I also recognize that the Bears can only field they can probably only field real what's the word I'm looking for? Proposals from teams that are in that like top 5 slot. Because if they really want Marvin Harrison, I wouldn't say anything if they took him number 1 overall, but they might be able to leverage it into some other picks and still get their guy.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And yeah, I think if you add Marvin Harrison Jr. and they got DJ Moore right now, I mean, it's a really good tandem of weapons to give Justin Fields.
And you let Justin Fields throw the
Yes.
ball
Yeah, absolutely.
and do some design
Sure.
runs too, maybe.
No, 100%. And yeah, because that's going to keep defenses honest. No, I think that that would be the way to go. And I got to ask you though, as a Patriots fan, where would you like to see them go? I mean, I'm assuming they're taking a quarterback, right? So where would you like to see them go with that pick, assuming that whoever ends up becoming the number one quarterback in the draft is gone? Is there somebody out there you like that you think is a good fit? And also, I guess we don't know who's going to be their coach next year either. So
That's very true, but I can totally see the Patriots taking Drake May because he fits the mold of he's like the Justin Herbert prototype, basically. And I could see that totally happening. There's guys that I wouldn't mind them taking a flyer on. Caleb Williams, obviously, if he's available. I I think that I would not hate on that pick because it's very high ceiling, but obviously we've seen him play not so great at times this year, so you never know. I would not want them to take a flyer on the LSU kid. I do think that he's good, but winning the Heisman is like the biggest curse in the NFL, and so I would not want that. I wouldn't be that sad if they took a run at Michael Penix either, if he's available, because obviously a lot of talent. He's left-handed, which Tua seems to be doing just fine. But that kid has such a will to win and seems to come up big in the biggest moments and has been doing that at Washington, did it at Indiana too. So there's a pedigree there. One thing is for sure about this draft class, though, is that just about every one of the kids that are coming out has a lot of experience. There's not that many, like, Drake May might be the only kid who doesn't have the kind of experience that the other guys do. Like, Penix is coming out with what, like 4 years of starting? That's pretty good.
yeah, it's pretty solid. Yeah, it's a pretty experienced group. No doubt about that. I mean, and what if the Patriots choose to do something unprecedented, and that's draft a scrappy kid out of Michigan?
Mm,
Yeah, there's that. Yeah,
I
JJ McCarthy does not jump off the page.
no, he does not. Bo Nix, I would take even before that, but I think Bo Nix is probably a backup at best in the NFL. And I just say that because like playing at Oregon, it was hard. I mean, and then he played at Auburn and he was not the same guy. So like the coaching scheme obviously is different, the offensive scheme, the level of talent and so forth. But obviously he's a good quarterback. But if you're talking about like the top tier guys, like if the Patriots take a flyer on somebody that's not some of the guys that I've already named, I'll be like, oh, because they've already done that. They've already taken the guy who has like a B minus ceiling at best, and it's Mac Jones.
Yeah,
And we saw how that worked out. So I'd rather them take one of the can't miss guys, but we'll figure all of that out whenever this week in the NFL is over. We will probably know on Monday whether Bill Belichick is still the coach or not, and then we'll assess from there. Because the hardest part is going to be, well, who do they take next? And I have no clue who you untenable position to be the guy who replaces the guy.
sure. Question for you. So, what scenario is most likely? I'll give you some options. Belichick just straight up gets fired.
No,
Belichick gets traded. Belichick
that's on the table.
retires,
He's not going to retire. I think that the most likely scenario is that
or he
Bob
stays
Kraft,
with
who,
less power.
all right, well, all right. So I think Bob Kraft probably I mean, they've played better. They have looked better in the last 4 weeks or so. And even this game against the Bills, they turned the ball over 4 times, still only lost by 6. So they've played a lot better and looked less laughing stock than they had in the first, 12 weeks of the season. Bob Kraft probably is going to have a, a conversation with Bill Belichick. And my guess is that Kraft's going to say, like, look, I want to win. I still want to win. Do you still want to be here? I think Bill probably does. I think where they're going to hit a crossroads is if it comes down to separating the GM duties. Because let's face it, Bill Belichick at his age and what he has accomplished, in my opinion, has the right to say, no, I want to still be picking the personnel for this team. It's my team. But I also think that he has made a lot of errors in picking this personnel over the years, especially through the draft. And that 1 year that they spent a ton on free agency, not a lot of those guys are still on the team, and they gave them a lot of money. I think it's more likely that they move on from each other only because Bill Belichick's pride gets in the way of taking away GM duties. And Bob Kraft is like, look, I can't do that right now. Like, after what has happened, I'm the one cutting the checks. Then I just can't do this. Then the next scenario is, does Bill Belichick, step away from the team, or do they trade him? That part will be the most interesting, because if they trade him, how much do they get back for him, and what other guy do they get in here? Now, I know a lot of people have tried to link Vrabel to this job, but I think that if Belichick isn't there, it's Gerard Mayo's job to lose, because that seems to be the guy that everybody likes, former player, former Belichick player, has been on the staff for a few years. I think he's been coaching the defense in some capacity. I could see that happening. The players really like the guy. I just don't know if they're going to get Mike Vrabel in here, because I think Mike Vrabel probably wants to take over a contender, or at least a team that's in better shape. But you never know. That'll be the interesting part. But I'm now firmly on this place where I feel like it's inevitable that Belichick won't be there. But if he's still there, I'll be happy.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out for sure. He's one of those guys that's sort of he's earned the right to kind of write his own exit in a way.
Yes.
But you also have to know like when it's time. And I don't
Know
think
when
that
to
he's
hold
not
him.
capable of doing the job anymore. He out of everyone else, like he seems like a smart guy. We talked about his ego a while back, but he just has to. I mean, I just don't see that there's the potential for success for him or the franchise necessarily, at least not in the short term. If they continue this marriage, right? I think both parties could benefit from parting of ways and fresh
Sure.
starts.
And we will see what happens with that. Well, it has been over 2 hours now. It is getting closer to midnight here on the East Coast. And so I think it is about time to wrap it up. I mean, there's other stuff we can talk about. There's always sports topics, but Monday is going to be awesome. To be determined whether we're going to do a live show during the Natty or not. We'll just see what happens, but we will be back next Friday to talk about it and to talk about the upcoming NFL playoffs, because they will be right around the corner. If you want to find us anywhere else, TikTok at I&C Sports, Twitter at Iceman and Coach, on Facebook and on Twitch, you can search for I&C Sports. On YouTube, obviously, if you're here, but if you want to listen to us in audio, just search for Iceman and Coach on Apple, Spotify, or any of the other podcast apps, and MattyIceMedia.com for the Matty Ice Media Network podcast. Hopefully, we'll add some more in 2024. First show under our belt this year. Thought it was good. National championship. You said it's going to be the best ever. We got the prime glasses. Everything is going in our way, man. But do you have any parting thoughts for the few people that are left here?
Just hope everybody has a good start to the year. Obviously, we're going to wrap up the college football season Monday night. We're starting the playoffs, and then I think we're going to get a little hot and heavy into probably some March Madness
Oh,
on the
yes.
fringe here. So no, there's plenty of stuff ahead, but just like I said, hope everybody's year gets off to a good start. I know this can be a tough time of year for a lot of people, kind of the post-Christmas blues. The weather's really crappy outside, and the days are short, not a lot of sunshine. But hang in there. This too shall pass, and we'll be out in the sun enjoying ourselves in no time.
Yes, we will. And Brad and I will be figuring out how we're going to reset after this football season. And also, we'll be making an announcement soon about what we're going to do for the Super Bowl. I don't know if we're going to do the big production we did last year, but I think that we at least owe you, the listeners and the fans, something to do on the Super Bowl, whether it's giving out the IC awards or doing a draft of some sort. We had a good time last year. So look out for that wherever it is that we put out that kind of news. Everybody, I hope this finds you well and safe. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy whatever it is that you're doing. Hug those loved ones, and we'll see you next week. This is Football Friday.